Okay, for this shot, I've decided to do what I'm going to call a recap video. There's a number of things about it that were interesting challenges. That are worth recapping. Well, what are those challenges and say problems and solutions? Let's start turning things off one by one and take a peek. First of all, the storyboard shot. I'm going to show what I started with here. Let's go to the bottom. Okay, so this is the basic concept, and obviously ultimately I made some changes on the characterization. I don't know that what I did at the animation stage is better than what you feel coming through in the storyboard, but and by the way, there's my webcam. I know you love to see me. But let's take a look. Number one, Luca and the fire. Okay, so we've got Luca off in the background, sitting around the fire. So number one, when I looked at this, I wondered if I could actually just swipe the fire from another shot. Well, it turned out I could do just that, and the way I did it, let's start killing things here and see what we have. So this is the fire, and the fire had some issues in it where I inadvertently, like a bonehead, baked the pencil test into it. So that took a little bit of doing to get rid of, but that was later. But the lesson here, the takeaway, was that in Krita you can just go copy layer, which is what I did, and then I came back here and just did paste layer. So that would be this right here. So if you paste a layer, obviously there's no layer on the clipboard because I didn't clip it just now. But yeah, so that gave you this, and then what I did was I applied a transform mask and hoped for the best. And the way that looks is you would take your entire layer and just resize it. And if you use a transform mask as opposed to just a simple transformation, it'll apply it to the entire animated sequence, which it actually did without mishap. Now, in order to make this play, I'll turn the background on so you can sort of see over it what's going on, because obviously it's fairly fuzzy, but at actual size I felt like the level of detail was suitable. So I really just drew the silhouette of Luca's head turning, and then so another question that might come up is, well, what about all those pencil issues that were corrupting this animation of the fire? And I basically dealt with it in one main way, which was that if you have a layer, this is kind of I guess we want to go up here actually, the somewhat painful way to do it, but not too painful, would be to select the key layer that's got the garbage on it and then create a selection. So what I did was I created a selection that was something like this, and then I hit the shift key. Okay, now if I was going to do this again, which I probably should, if the truth be known, should probably grab this as well, because you can see there's some pencil activity there. So the solution is to just hit the delete key to get rid of the artifacts, and then this is the painful part, but not very painful, is you just hit the next keyframe toggle and go through the whole list. So, you know, no big deal. It takes about a minute, not even. And that got rid of the artifacts. Okay. So now, one could argue, actually, if you wanted to talk about how to make this maybe even a little bit better, one thought would be, if you grab a selection, let's look at the tool options. Yeah, it looks like it doesn't really give me, you can anti-alias the selection, but you can't really make it into a gradient where where the selection goes gradually from opaque to transparent. Now, you could if you did a filter mask. So, for example, the way you would do this, I'm basically going to add a blur. So the idea would be let's create a Gaussian blur and let's make it really fuzzy. Okay. But the problem is we don't want this rapid transition from sharp to fuzzy. Well, unlike a transform mask, a filter mask, you actually have access to the quote-unquote mask. So then what we could do here is just take the airbrush, and currently I believe it's set to black. And let's just kind of go like this, like that. Okay, and then let's really make it dark here so that we're seeing, and you can fine tune it. Obviously you could go like this, and so we're changing the mask. And now if we apply the layer mask, which we really can do just by flattening the layer, let's give that a crack and see how it does. So you can see what it's doing is it's calculating the Gaussian blur on frame after frame after frame after frame. So that's going to take a couple minutes, but it's probably worth doing because it's going to give the whole thing this nice gradient into blurriness. Now if we turn off the selection, let's see if we got what we think we got. And it looks like we did. Not too bad. So that makes the smoke kind of diffuse. Now, in this case, let's look at his shadow here. Okay, the shadow is just a static layer, so let's use that to our advantage. Let's grab the foliage brush, and we're just going to go with some black here. And it's already partially transparent, but I'll go ahead and turn the opacity down so I can kind of work it in a little bit. But right, so that gives us a little bit of shadowing off the rocks that comprise the that surround the fire. Okay, not too bad. And arguably we could actually enhance our glow as well from the fire. Now here we want to turn the opacity way down. And I want to kind of zoom out and make sure I'm not overdoing it. Let's get a little bit of orange in there. Okay. It doesn't take much. And we will save our work. Okay, so that worked pretty well. Now this is not perfect. If it was really grabbing your attention the whole time, it might be questionable. One could argue that you could go in there and manually paint a little bit more fuzziness or even transparency into the smoke, but basically it's pretty much working. Let me see what this is. Okay, yeah. And here, again, we could fine-tune this. Probably, honestly, something like that probably looks better as opposed to fully opaque. So let's kind of dial that in. Okay, that takes care of Luca and the fire. Let's turn that off. The background, just so we're covering it here really quickly, consists of, I needed to put a layer behind Luca to sort of sew him to his environment. As long as we're here and fixing things, let's just go ahead and fix this. Okay. Then we added foliage that is going to be between the background and Mel and Tianara, and then I added just this little bit of a highlight layer, you know, which you just do at full opacity and then just turn it down and dial it in. Something like that. So that took care of the background. Okay. So Tianara and Mel, are both, there's probably not a lot to say about this. I mean, it was pretty straightforward. I knocked out a quick pencil test, inked it, did the coloring based on the just straight out of the color model, so nothing fancy there. Then I added 2 shadow layers. One general shadow layer to just kind of separate them from the light source, and then a second shadow layer to you know, delineate their own local shadows. So, and then if we put Luca back in, we can see that one of the things about the animation that I felt was important is you want to make sure you sequence things. So and it's hard to see without the background on, so we'll turn the layer, the background back on. But what I'm pointing out here is that if Tianara did her action and Luca turned his head at the same time, you would never notice one or the other. The likelihood, because she's much bigger in the frame, is that you wouldn't notice Luca. So therefore, you gain nothing by having Luca turn his head. And I'm not arguing that that actually is that important in this shot. It's probably not. He could have just been looking this way at the beginning of the shot, so that would be fine. But what I chose to do was, you want to have Tianara move, Luca turns his head, then Mel reacts. If these actions overlap, you're cheating the audience, because they're just not going to get everything that happened. They're just simply not. And then, you know, Mel's action probably needs a little work, as well as his shadows, frankly. I just did the one shadow layer on him. So I think that this would be a good time to maybe do a little bit of surgery to tighten that up. One thing you can do, it's really quite a significant thing actually that you can do in Krita, is that when you've got a complex stack of layers like you have here with Mel, okay, let's go ahead and turn everybody off just to keep things simple. So we'll take Tianara, turn her off, turn off Luca. So now all we have is Mel, and you can see that what we actually have here is he's broken into pieces, his head, his body. So when I mapped out the animation, I basically said, okay, how can I cut him up into pieces so I don't have to actually just keep redrawing everything over and over. So the point that I was going to make a moment ago is that one thing you can do is if you need to make a slight modification to your character, which I did do here. I'll do it again right here. But what you're doing is you're going to hit the free transform tool. But then if you put it in liquify mode, but what's actually selected, oh, my apologies, I did not mean to sneeze in everyone's ears. Is that if you've got the group selected, then you can go in here and make edits to your drawing like so. And I don't like that at all. I'm going to hit escape and just cancel that. But like this, maybe if I wanted to straighten out his headband a little bit. And what happens is the keyframe data, the transformation, or in this case the liquify action, actually gets propagated to every single one of these constituent layers. And so it becomes quite quick and easy to massage your drawing, even though it consists of many layers. Another thing I noticed here is that, and probably the one disadvantage, the one thing that is a little bit of a disadvantage to working this way, is that you can't hit the next keyframe, previous keyframe. You have to click here because the group layer doesn't actually have keyframes and can't. One thing I will note here is this little toggle pass through. Let me check here and see, because it's actually turned. Okay, it was turned off. Yet, obviously, the actions are passing through. Here they're passing through as well. So as far as I can tell at this point, unless someone wants to put something in the comments and correct me, is that at least in this version, 4.1.7, which I'm still using, because 4.3 has a legion of issues that I won't get into today. But the pass-through option seems to be working all the time, whether you actually turn it on or off. So, for what that's worth. What I've generally found is when you're working with groups like this, you really do want the pass-through option on. So, alright, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the shadow layer, and let's go ahead and do a little massaging. So here we can jump from key to key because obviously we're on a regular paint layer that has keyframes. So here, yeah, right here, kind of felt like I wanted to smooth that out. I'm going to go ahead and hit erase and cut a little bit of dimensionality into that. Here I think we could probably do the same thing. There, that's the issue I was thinking of that I definitely did not like. I don't mind if the shadow jumps a little bit, although it would be better if it didn't, only because, yeah, I mean, he is moving his head, so obviously that's no big deal. Okay, so here we'll go like that. Okay. Now, question, do we need a patch layer on his upper arm? I would say yes. So let's go ahead and select the upper arm. And what I'm going to do is select the flesh tone so that I can just go like that. I'm just going to go through here and really obvious right there. Yeah, we'll go with that. I mean, why don't we actually, let's go ahead and go back to the group layer. Okay, well, hold on a second, that won't work. Let's stick with the upper arm, but let's go ahead and do this, do the liquify tool again. What I want to do is basically just tighten that up right there. Boom. Good. And now we can go back to painting and just paint out the little flaw. So this is just, you know, cases of doing little fine tunings that just polish it up a little bit. Okay. So now the thing I said was I was going to add a second shadow layer. And so how does that work? Well, I'm going to turn on inherit alpha, which means that if I add shadowing that goes outside of the contained layers, it gets cut off by whatever has color. I hope that makes sense. So what do we want to do here? Well, what I'm thinking is, first of all, I want to put a little something under his hair, but that didn't actually make any sense because obviously I was on the wrong key. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to insert a key. So what I'm going to, don't want to be in eraser mode, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and put the, we want to keep it fairly simple. And now what I'm going to do is I just want to do one sort of body part at a time. Once you have animation keys in there, you can just keep rocking. But the danger is that if you jump from one body part to another and don't get the entire sequence of this in, it's highly likely that you're going to forget something, at least for me. So now let's dial in the tonality of that shadow. And obviously it doesn't need to be very dark. And then we'll go back to the beginning and look at other areas where we may want some additional shadowing. I'm going to say I need to paint this somewhat carefully. Well, I don't know, actually that's fine. Let's just do it that way. And then we'll add a little bit of the suggestion of wrinkles on his garment. And then well, and I should say this is actually the downside of this approach. Okay, so what do I do? Well, if I go Control C, Control V, yeah, this is pretty obnoxious to have to do this, but and then grab this key and drag it to here. And I think for my purposes right now, what I'm going to do is this is at 19%. I'm just going to set this one to 19% as well and just let it be on 2 layers for now. Okay. Here, we'll just move it slightly. Same thing here. So we're kind of getting away with murder as far as manipulating our shadows, which is cool. And then this one should just be redrawn. So hit the B key. We'll kind of erase something out of it. Leave in a little bit of a suggestion there of a wrinkle situation. And I think that's fine. Okay, so now the question is, can we just sew these 2 layers together? I'm going to give it a crack. And then of course we need to reactivate Inherit Alpha and let's see if it worked. Boom. Yeah, that's fine. Now, one thing you want to be careful of with what I just did is you'll notice that the baked together layer, the merged layer, is actually at full opacity. So what it did was it took the 19% opacity that was in the layer and it actually baked that into the color. So that can be a problem. There's ways you could turn around and mitigate that if you had to, but it's just something to be aware of. Now, I actually have to say that in this case, I feel like I want to turn it down a little bit. I think with that, we'll call it good. I'm going to go ahead and go into the face layer and just make one little tweak here. Okay. That was a little too much. Okay, and right there, You want to be careful to try to match these pretty closely, actually. Let's just turn on onion skins. Why fight it? At least that way I'm getting it pretty darn close to perfect. Okay, so now I see one flaw here in the shadow layer. Boom. So we'll fix that. Okay. So that pretty much takes care of Mel. So I would say the real coup in terms of the look of the shot, however, was here. I actually took my airbrush and just painted black around the perimeter, which in normal mode looks like this. When I switch it to overlay mode, it really made the saturation pop. And then I added a second layer in normal mode, so it didn't have that saturation effect. And that pretty much is the shot. There's one more thing I could see if you really wanted to knock it out of the park. There's one more thing I could see doing. Right there. I'm going to say that in the background, top layer, this touched up stuff. Need to move this up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and put a keyframe at the top. And now, right there, so when Mel's hand moves, it seems to me that the leaves should move as well. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a small move. And then I'm going to have them pop back. Probably here. Let's just see how that looks. Ooh, that didn't work at all. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this key back over here, and let's just make that a little more localized motion. The funny thing about it is, if you really wanted to sell it, what you'd probably do is in other words, you're kind of letting the leaves bounce around a little bit. I don't like it. I think it looks too rubbery. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to delete the keyframes, not hit delete. So now the question becomes, should there be any motion at all? And I would say no. I think it's just an additional distraction that doesn't really help the shot at all. So now, is there anything you could do to make it more interesting? I can think of one thing. So I'll show this technique just because it's an interesting one. What if we said, let's call this leaves highlight, but now let's put this in a group. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is add another layer that's going to be in, oh heck, let's just say overlay mode. And again, this might not work very well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the airbrush and I'm going to insert a key here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go forward this might be better as addition. Let's see here. That doesn't seem to be doing anything. We're inheriting alpha. Maybe we need to be like super aggressive with this effect. Yeah, we do. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm essentially I'm just inserting keyframes so that each time the airbrush effect is slightly different. And the reason I'm doing that is so that I can then go back and create a bit of an effect of the leaves picking up the glint from the fire. Does this work? I don't know if it works. I kind of think it doesn't, but we can try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll just turn it back off. Right now, the thing I did notice is that the effect is too strong. Okay? And we can solve that quite easily by just turning the opacity down. We want it to be a subtle effect. That's not too bad, actually. Again, it's pretty subtle. Let's look at it full size. Yeah, again, super subtle, but that's okay. I don't think it helps much, and I don't think it does any harm. So we'll actually take this and merge the group. Control E. So that bakes the effect into the leaves themselves. And of course, if we decided later we didn't really like it, we could just delete all these keyframes. You know, no big deal. Now, right now, one of the issues with the shot is that by the way, the length of this is wrong too. Let's just pop it up to 60 and excuse me, see how that goes. What I was going to say is that this Krita is actually playing back animation at 8 frames per second. So I'm mapping this whole thing out at 8 frames per second. So probably the most efficient way to kick that up to 24 frames a second without having to go in and manually scale all these frames and blah 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 would be to simply render this out as an image sequence, bring it into OpenTunes, which it'll just load in as an image sequence that's going to play 3 times too fast, and then in OpenTunes you simply right click on your layer, and the pop-up menu has an option called reframe, and I would reframe it on 3s, which would just basically take the entire image sequence and make every single image in the sequence 3 frames long, and then that would reproduce at 24 frames a second exactly the shot you have here. So that's pretty much it. The you know, what were the lessons learned here? I would say number 1, using the gradient overlay to pop the saturation and drive home the darkness, I think was quite helpful. The ability to copy and paste layers, animated layers, so that the entire fire and smoke situation was literally taken from another shot very, very quickly. And that fire has now appeared in 2 or 3 shots actually. I know I've animated it 3 times. I think I've taken the same animation of it and used it either 2 or 3 additional times. Being able to use the liquify tool on a group and have that propagate down through the group so that you can essentially fine-tune a complex animated frame, which by the way I'm about to redo because I can see right now one thing that's bugging me a little bit is the overall shape of Mel's head, and that's actually where flipping the canvas definitely is well advised. And it just bakes in. Okay, so that's it. That's the whole shot. Obviously the look of the animation and certainly the way I chose to draw Mel in this particular shot is highly stylized. I'm kind of going for a little bit of an anime effect. I think it worked. And I would say with that, there will be more later.